First diver is Noah Garcia. It's his first time at NCAAs. He's from Stanford University. He'll be doing a front 2 1/2 somersault pike. It's a pretty decent first start to the competition here. You'll see that quite a bit in the first round. It was a pretty good dive.
Logan, 107C30.
Logan Schinholzer from Virginia Tech doing a front 3 1/2 tuck here in the first round. Excellent dive. Maybe a little bit short, but pretty good overall. You'll see some pretty good marks.
Chris, from our vantage point, you see him split his knees right at the beginning of the takeoff into the somersault. Do you think that's going to affect what the judges are seeing, or do you think that's just something we see at our angle?
Actually, what we have the advantage of seeing is the front and the side. The judges, unfortunately, can only see the side, so we have a pretty good angle of what's going on. So the judges aren't going to be affected too much by what's going on. Jacob from University of Virginia just did a 105B. It looks like it's a dive change.
5235D, 29.
Connor from Indiana starting the meet off with a back 2 1/2 twister. Little unsquare on the bottom, pretty good start. Connor's what we call a platform specialist, so you're going to be looking forward to seeing him on 10 meter later on in the week. And Jordan Long from Duke doing a 105B front 2 1/2 somersault pike. Pretty decent entry, a little to the side. Judges aren't going to see that too much. Also a little bit out. We'll see what they do with it.
53.3. Will, 405C, 31.
Will Chandler from University of Texas doing an inward 2 1/2 somersault tuck. Now, he didn't compete last year, so we'll see how he does. Very nice first dive. That's a strong start to his NCAAs.
Those of you watching at home, you see how he rides the diving board up, lets it get to the top before he starts the somersault. That's the way you make inward 2 1/2. Connor will be doing a 105B as well, front 2 1/2 pike. That dive looked like it got a little bit out ahead of him. Saw him go in the little slight angle a little bit further out. Looked like he may have just done a little bit of a pike save early there. Devin's going to follow that as well with a 105B. Front 2 1/2 somersaults pike. See, Devin rode the board a lot better on that one. Stayed in a lot closer to the board, squared it up, finished nice. Got a high of an 8 on that dive, low of 7.
105B, 26.
They're off. This is Devin. I'm sorry. That was Joshua Purse performing the previous dive. See, Joshua got a little off balance over on the corner of the board, does a really good job staying with it, gets it up and down vertical, a little bit out away from the board.
This is Ryan Hawkins from Virginia Tech. I've actually had the opportunity to compete with him every once in a while. Pretty good kid. You'll notice that him and Logan are actually very fast spinners. A little forward on that start, didn't quite get a nice ride off the board. Left it a little bit short.
49.5. John, 105B, 26.
John from Auburn will be doing front 2 1/2 pike.
A lot of people are doing this dive this round. The judges are going to want to see something that's separated from everybody else. They want to see a very high and fast, real tight line in the air. They want to see something that drops from above the railing.
You see the same dive over and over and over again. You have to do something to separate from for the judges.
105B, 26.
We're going to see Kyle performing the 105B yet again. He was out just a little bit farther. Did let the diving board carry him up and got out of it over the top, lined it up. But I think the distance there may count against him a little bit.
Harrison, 51-52B, 3-2.
Harry Jones from Arizona State began his college career at South California. Harry actually had the opportunity to go over to China for about 6 weeks to compete in a diving show right before Olympic trials. So he's back in the States now. First dive for him, full out. Pretty good marks. That's a solid start for Harry.
335D, 3-0.
Christian, 2012 Olympian, one of the premier divers on springboard for the United States, beginning his NCAAs here with a reverse 2.5 twister. He's definitely a twister. This will be a good dive. As you can see, drops it from above the railing.
Christian just makes that dive look easy.
Yeah, well, for him it is easy, Kevin. It is easy. Very nice start for Christian.
69 even. Corey, 405C.
Christian will add a twist to that in his final round as well. He'll do a triple or 3.5 twisting, reverse 1.5.
This is Corey Bowersox from Texas. Corey is a very, very good competitor when he's consistent. If he can be consistent today, he'll be one of your top finishers. Excellent start. Excellent start. A little quick off the board. He could have a little more height and connection, but that was pretty good overall.
I remember watching Corey start when he was about 10 years old. He spun fast then, too.
John Fox from Kentucky. Doesn't have a lot of DD, but he is consistent and can nail his entries. Starting off with a front 2.5 somersault pike. A little loose in the chest, a little heavy on the bottom, not something you normally see from him, so we'll see what happens.
52 even. Michael, 105B, 26.
Michael from Harvard University will be doing front 2.5 pike again. You saw he got in the water a little bit cleaner. He was a little higher than John previously. Also received slightly higher marks.
Jamie, 105B, 26.
Jamie Bissett from Purdue. He's an Ontario native. Pretty solid diver. Also starting off with front 2.5.
Awards.
Pretty clean looking dive. Maybe a little bit higher on that start. Spinning pretty slow there. Could get a little bit quicker connect on the start.
105B, 26.
Riley is actually a Canadian Olympic team member 2 times on platform. 16th in Beijing and 11th in London. Watch out for him later on today. He's going to light it up.
58.5. Brent, 105B, 26.
Brent Sterling from University of Tennessee doing a front 2.5 somersaults pike. Brent gets that dive going really well. Checks out over the top, way high in the air. A little bit farther out than he might want to be.
61.1.
Next up is Darian Schmidt from Indiana. I've had the privilege to work with him this year. Watch out for Darian. He is much higher in his dives than everybody else. Real strong kid. Also pretty fun to watch. Starting off with a gainer 2.5 twister here. A little crooked on that start. Did a pretty good job with it. Followed his fingertips through the start. Pretty square on the bottom.
Darian has spent his entire career training out of the IU Bloomington pool. He's a state champion here in Indiana. I believe his junior year.
Also a Big Ten champion this year on 1 meter.
Sean McKinney from LSU doing 105B.
Awards.
And he got that dive up in the air really nice, got it spinning over the top. Good drop time there, got in the water pretty clean. A couple of 8s, low of 7, it's been 58.5.
Clark Thomas from Missouri. Interesting fact about Clark, he never was defeated in high school on 1 meter. Starting off with an inward 2.5 tuck. We'll see what happens. A little by, but pretty good start.
He definitely showed he can do that dive.
51.15. Shane, 105B, 26.
Shane Miskell from Ohio State, also another great performer. Saw him at Big Tens earlier this year, starting off with a 105B. It's a pretty good job for Shane, real nice and high. Could have been a little cleaner on the bottom. Usually puts it in pretty clean. Although he looks like an MMA fighter, he's pretty graceful.
Yes, he got in the water really nice there.
Greg Ferrucci from Kentucky doing a back 2.5 somersault tuck. Now Greg, one of the fastest spinners I've ever seen. Really impressive.
It's his first trip back to the natatorium since 2006.
Pretty good job. Could have gotten a little bit more extension off of the board. Finished his push all the way through for a faster connect, but also a very, very good job with it.
He got out of that nice and tight, lined it up.
Now David Benucci from Missouri, one of the most consistent competitors I've competed against. Always a top 8 finisher. He's a kid to look out for. A little too much pepper on the gumbo there.
Yeah,
a little over on the bottom.
He got it up very well. Looked like he was going to get lined up and just kept on moving. We have Lane Rogers from Purdue University. He also a previous Indiana State champion in high school here, doing a 105B. Lane's definitely not a stranger to the IUPUI natatorium. He put that dive in the water nice and clean. Very high and fluid diver. Should see a lot of good entries out of Lane.
Taylor, 403B, 24.
Taylor from Stanford, beginning with an inward 1.5 somersault pike. Pretty clean bottom. Backed it out just a little bit low. Could see a little more height on that start.
49.2. Nick, 107C, 30.
Nick McCrory, another 2012 Olympian. Now, although Nick's known for platform diving, he can definitely hang with the big guys on springboard.
Nick's a fierce competitor on the springboard as well. He got himself out of balance there. He's going to take a balk on that dive. For those that are watching that may not understand what just happened, he decided to stop, get his balance, recollect himself. He'll take a deduction of 2 points per judge from each of the judges' scores following the dive.
Even though he got a second chance at it, still buckled his knee. Not the start that he wants to his NCAAs, but don't worry, he will definitely make it up in the next 5 dives. Nick also battling knee injuries and problems with his knees recently. Ahmad Abdulatif from Indiana, actually the Egyptian 1 meter and 3 meter national champion earlier this year. Ahmad, fortunately, looking to a potential berth at the World Championships later on. Pretty clean for Ahmad, pretty clean. Now, if you'll notice, Ahmad spins pretty fast, so it makes your bottoms, you have to be extremely precise and consistent on your outs. Very little room for error when you're spinning that fast.
Jordan, 105B, 26.
Jordan Lesser from Minnesota, also starting off with front 2.5 somersault pike. Pretty good job by Jordan. He swung his arms under instead of coming lateral. That's a little bit extra on the bottom. That's why you saw that roll by on the entry.
He's worked the corner of the diving board there very well.
105B, 26.
Raphael's from the University of Arizona doing 105B front 2.5 pike. Gets a lot of power in the hurdle, stands it up rather nicely. Again, he's spinning pretty quick on the top. Has to line the bottom up, goes over slightly just at the end of that dive.
105B, 26.
Michael Ross from University of Minnesota, front 2.5 pike. Step into the hurdle, steps back from the end of the board a little bit, has to work a little harder, doesn't drop from quite as high up. And the scores are going to be reflective of that.
Thomas, 105B, 26.
This is the final diver in the first round, Thomas Neubacher from Florida State, also doing a front 2.5 somersault pike. If you'll notice right behind Tommy is Patrick Jeffrey, a 1988 diving as Olympic qualifier. His coach currently right now, and Tommy did a pretty good job with that on the start. A little out of control on that come out.
Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment, we will have a swim-off for 16th place in the 50-yard freestyle. Anthony Cox in 4 for California. Joe Aldeluca of Louisville in 5. Both guys were 1963 this morning.
I never heard anything from him. The ring company? Yeah, I looked him up and everything, and I never heard anything from him. Did you call them? I did not call them. But I've been talking. I've been moving a lot with other things, so I've been keeping real busy. Getting close? Yeah, I think so. So yeah, it's been good. You know what? Everything that you taught me and helped me out with, it's just been unbelievable. You're interviewing great. Like it. Yeah, it's just a matter of being in the right.
Okay, folks, if you're interested, let's make some noise for these guys. 1963 for both of them. And it is Cox at 960, 3/100ths out of Joe Aldeluca. Joe Aldeluca, Louisville reaches in, and it is DeLuca, 1951 to win the swim-off. Cox is 1979. Thank you, guys, and thank you, divers and diving officials. Appreciate your help.
All right, now that we have completed the swim-off, we're going to start the second round of the 1-meter preliminaries.
No, we'll be doing a back 1.5 somersault pike. Sorry for that, folks. As it is with sprinters, they're fast in, fast out. Kevin and I couldn't even quite prepare for that one.
Only took them about 19 seconds.
Oh, excellent job on that come out. Great extension, nice and clean the lines, and just absolutely shredded the bottom. That'll go big.
47.15. Logan, 51.52B, 3-2.
Logan from Virginia Tech will be doing a front 2.5 full twist. You see, he sets up the hurdle, steps back, gets himself leaning forward, makes it really difficult to get all that dive around. Finishes up a little bit out, a little bit short.
A little bit rushed on that takeoff. The one thing you want to do on a hard dive when you don't have a good hurdle is exhaust the board of everything it has to give.
Tell the kids that all the time. You just wait for the board, wait for the board, wait for the board.
Same dive again from Jacob from Virginia. Done a little bit better, but slightly out. A little bit separation in the legs there is probably what the judges saw. Lost his legs a little bit.
We have Connor Murphy doing 403B inward 1.5 somersaults pike from Indiana University. He started that dive looking off to the right just a little bit. Judges are going to notice that he was off to the side. He still got up and down pretty clean, got in the water pretty smooth.
50.4. Jordan, 107.
Connor's got what we call a mind eraser, and they completely make the judges forget of any mistake they see in the air because he absolutely shreds the bottom with his entry.
Awards.
Jordan with a front 3.5 tuck there. A little forward on the board, couldn't quite maintain control.
31.5.
Little out and short.
Will, 205C, 3-0.
Will Chandler, University of Texas, back 2.5 somersaults tuck. Like to see him ride the board up into the air, somersault on the way up so that he can control the lineup on the way back down. Just a little bit late on that come out. He did a pretty good job riding the board up, but if you spin that fast, you got to kick out pretty quick at the right spot or you're going to find yourself going long.
Connor, 203B.
Connor Karemski from Stanford University is doing a back 1.5 somersault pike. Now this is his first time here at NCAA's.
Awards.
Shows pretty good control on his come out. Looked like he dropped his heels a little bit as he took off, and it left him a little farther out than he would like to be.
24.85. Josiah, 305C, 3-0.
Josiah from University of Utah doing reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Wow, pretty good job on that. A little rushed and hit and whipped off the start. Very nice control on the bottom. Put it in pretty clean too.
58.5. Devin, 5335D, 3-0.
Devin Burnett from SMU doing a reverse 2.5 twister. Pretty good job with that. Could have been a little bit more narrow with his fingertips through the top, so it was a little cockeyed and off to the side of the board, but it'll go. It'll go. Yep, there we go. Pretty good scores. Ryan Hawkins from Virginia Tech doing inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Chest was a little forward on that takeoff and a little wide with the throw, so he's not getting quite the momentum he needs on the start. Did a very good job with it, though. John from Auburn, reverse 1.5 twister. Wanted to point out that he is the fourth.
Awards.
Did a pretty good job. Would make 1 through 3 pretty proud.
Yes, he should. That dive looked really good going in the water. Feet went just slightly over, and the judges kind of counted off for that. We have Kyle doing a inward 2.5 somersault tuck from Virginia Tech.
Awards.
Now, Chris, that dive looks like it jumps further back than some of the other ones we've seen. Can you explain to the people at home what happens to cause that to do that?
Kyle had a slower arm swing than he should have had, so what happens is his butt tends to back out as soon as he pushes instead of stay on the line of the board. So the board's actually pushing him off instead of up where he needs to go. So with that backing off, it's hard to hit it for vertical. Harry Jones doing what he does best, and that is lighting it up. Absolutely awesome. Good job, Harry.
Harry does a really good job riding the board, staying with it, using every last ounce that it has in it.
405C, 3-1.
Christian's going to show us the 405C. Pay attention to the arm swing from home. See if he gets his arms up over his head, as Chris was pointing out earlier, and how that affects the outcome of the dive.
Awards.
Christian just makes that look so easy and smooth. It's almost like he's doing an inward dive tuck by the time he gets done. You see him finishing high, lining up, and just disappearing. Gets the first 9 on the board from the judges panel.
Christian did a phenomenal job with that. He could take it up just a little bit more, and we'd see straight 9s across the board. He couldn't have done anything different. That was almost textbook. Here's Corey from Texas doing a back 2.5 somersault tuck. It's a pretty good job from Corey. Didn't quite get fingertips all the way through, so it was a little slower than normal for him, so he left it a little bit short and had to pull it on. Sean from Kentucky, inward 1.5 somersault pike.
John's list of dives doesn't carry as high a degree of difficulty, so he needs to make the dives that much better. He comes into the round in 13th position. And he jumps through the roof on that dive. It rotated a little bit slow, made it a little harder for him to find the end. Just maybe slightly over, but put it in the water nice and clean.
48 even. Michael, 107C.
Michael Mosca from Harvard, front 3.5 somersault tuck. I actually had the privilege of working with Mike last summer before Olympic trials. He came out and trained at the National Training Center with us before we went out. Ooh, little stuck on the start there. Not the start he wanted. He also drew his knees up a little bit instead of finishing his push all the way through. That's why it was a little bit slower than you would have seen from other competitors. Jamie Bissett from Purdue doing a back 2.5 somersault tuck.
Awards.
A little bit loose and flat on that kick out. Divers, especially in back 2.5 on 1 meter, have to kick high and tight to make sure they're hitting the flat line so they can take the entry all the way through for a nice clean rip. Riley McCormick, back 1.5 somersault pike. Now, as I noted earlier, Riley McCormick is actually a 2-time Olympian, so you'll see a little bit higher caliber of diving. Look at that toe point and that finish.
Beautiful entry, nice flat line going in the water, effortless takeoff.
52.9. Brent,
Going to come away with a couple 8s on that dive.
Brent Sterling from Tennessee doing a full out, so it's a front 2.5 somersault with 1 twist. Pretty good job with it. Could have been a little bit flatter on the twist. What happens is if the diver doesn't hit full extension on the way out, his twist slows down a little bit, so it's a little short. Darian doing a front 3.5 somersault tuck. This kid, if he's consistent and hits this dive, it is going to go big. He absolutely crushes the entry. Stomped the board a little bit, but absolutely crushed that entry. Good job, Darian.
There's the amnesia entry that Patrick Jeffries always talks about.
61.5. Sean, 205C, 3-0.
Sean McKinney from LSU doing a back 2.5 somersault tuck. A little bobble there. Sean looking not quite as confident as the judges would like to see. Actually had to come up perfectly right on. Should have just pressed at the hips, reached with the toes, but he ended up pulling shoulders first, which is why it went so far over.
25.5. Clark, 107C, 3-0.
Clark from Mizzou doing front 3.5 somersault tuck. Was just checking with my colleague to make sure the divers couldn't hear any of my commentary.
They'll let him know if they do.
Pretty good job from Clark. Maybe a tiny bit short.
46.5.
Yep. Again, just a reminder, Kevin and I have a terrible angle from where we're commenting from, so some of our analysis might be a little bit off from what you guys are seeing at home. We're a little diagonal instead of right on where you are. Shane from Ohio State doing a front 3.5 somersault tuck. Not a very good job on the end of the board, but he maintained it pretty well throughout, pretty short on his entry.
58.5.
Greg Louganis used to say that you always had to figure out how to get to the right place from the wrong place.
That's right.
Here we have Greg doing front 3.5 somersaults tuck from Kentucky.
Now what you're going to want to watch on this is Greg's height and especially his speed. This kid can spin like a top. A little too much spin on that one.
He is spinning. He's just not finding the bottom like we're used to seeing.
36 even.
He's got to dig a little bit more and use his core on the out so he stops it. David Banucci from Missouri doing full out. This is one of the hardest dives you'll see today, apart from Christian Ibsen's reverse 3.5 twister. Does a phenomenal job with it. A little bit forward with that last step, so it carried into his hurdle, so he wasn't quite in balance on the end of the board. Leaned it out just a little bit. Put it in vertical, though. That was pretty nice awards from the judges.
We have Lane with the front 3.5 somersault tuck. Lane from Purdue.
Pretty good job from Lane today. He's doing what high school state champions do best, and that's consistency. It might not have been the best 107 we'll see today, but it was definitely good enough to keep him up there with the guys.
Taylor, 105B, 26.
Taylor from Stanford doing front 2.5 somersault pike.
That was a very nice entry. Nice toe point lines getting into the water. Looked like it could have been a little further out than what he would have wanted for the judges' scores. But overall, very well done dive.
Now Nick, being a national and international competitor, knows how to keep his composure. Let's see if he can recover from that bob on the first round.
Yes, I believe he just recovered.
Phenomenal. Nick showing us how it's done.
That's what reverse 2.5 tuck should look like, folks. He's got 2 9s, couple of 8.5s there, 75 points. That's going to help his cause.
Ahmad from Indiana doing a front 3.5 somersault tuck. Now watch his speed. He can spin also. Pretty good job for Ahmad. He sometimes struggles a little bit with his entries, but that was pretty clean for him.
58.5.
He will definitely take that.
205C, 30.
Jordan from Minnesota, 205C, back 2.5 somersault tuck. Now Jordan has the luxury of working with Wenbo Chen, a decorated Olympic coach and decorated NCAA coach. A little loose on the come out, came out shoulders first instead of coming out at the knee first. So he's extending with the wrong part of his body first. That's why he's pulling by.
45 even. Rafael, 107C, 30.
Rafael from Arizona doing front 3.5 somersault tuck.
Rafael got that dive to jump up very nicely. Rode the board all the way up to the top, got it into the water clean.
Monster top. The Indiana weather doesn't seem to be playing any effect to those Arizona boys.
Not at all. Of course, it's starting to get nice out there today. 10 inches of snow a couple days ago. He had a couple 8.5s on that. Michael's doing 405C and we're 2.5 tuck. Struggled a bit with his takeoff there, had his head down, keep his chin up as he pushes through his feet, fully extend his legs. He'll have better luck getting it around.
The one thing you don't want to do on inwards is rush. Think of an inward like a golf swing. The harder you try, the worse you get.
Going to have to use that tomorrow at practice. We have Thomas doing front 3.5 somersault from Florida State University.
Pretty good job from Tommy. Could have seen a little bit more separation between throw and or push and throw. A little fast on the connection. We could have seen a little bit more height and extension off the board, but pretty good job with it. Here we go, starting the third round. Noah from Stanford with a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Pretty good job with that. Not quite the extension he would have liked off the board, but he did an awesome job with connection, time to closure, and on his out.
Logan, 53-35 T, 3-0.
Logan from Virginia Tech, reverse 2.5 twister.
Award.
A little forward on that takeoff, also a little crooked with his reach. Pretty decent marks. Could have seen a little bit more out of him, but he's looking pretty good today. Jacob from Virginia, inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Ooh, he drew his knees off the board, so he didn't finish his push. So right off the bat, didn't quite have the spring from the board that he needed. I personally thought he did a pretty good job with that.
Connor, 303B, 2-4.
Connor from IU doing a reverse 1.5 pike. Connor struggled a little bit on the takeoff, hipped it out quite a bit. What that means is he tried to get into his pike too fast off the board, leaning a little forward on that. So we would like to see him take it up the line and bring it about half of a smart car in from the middle of the pool.
Is that what you're driving down there in Bloomington these days, Chris?
Absolutely not. Smart car, dumb purchase. That was a full out from Jordan from Duke. Left it a little bit short, also a little bit forward on the start.
Will, 105B,
A lot of these guys, some of the mistakes I'm seeing from these guys is on the bigger dives. They're not quite just being patient on the board. They're muscling through it. They just need to be relaxed and keep their composure out there. Here's Will from Texas, front 2.5 somersault pike.
Will got that leaning just a little bit forward over his toes as he left the diving board. Needs to sit back a little bit more and let the board help him out.
Connor, 51-52.
Comes away with 52 points, so it's not terrible for him. We have Connor doing a full out. Connor does a much better job of getting up into the hurdle, keeping his body line straight up and down, letting the board do the work for him. Gets the somersault moving quick, squares it out, goes in vertical.
Josiah, 205C, 3-0.
Josiah will be doing back 2.5 somersaults tuck, University of Utah. Comes into the round in 7th place. Gets off the board all right. As he's coming out in the wrong sequence of movements. His feet should be coming out first, looking down the leg line, and then look back for the water. He comes out hands and head first, leaves himself a little bit loose and short.
Here we have Devin Burnett from SMU. We're doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. little bit wide on his reach, pulled his shoulders first on the start. That's why the out was a little bit long. What you do on the start tends to show or foreshadow what comes out on your come out. So he needed a little bit more reach, a little more vertical stand, so he could have a nice front side come out on the out. Here's Ryan from Virginia Tech doing a back 2.5 somersault tuck. Pretty good job with it. Maybe just a little low on that kick out, but he did a phenomenal job staying tight in the core.
54 even. John, 53-35 D.
John will be doing reverse 2.5, twisting 1.5 from Auburn University. I really like the way he gets his arms straight up over his head, waits on the diving board to lift him, starts the twist. Twist just looks very smooth and tight, gets it vertical, and then just barely ducks his head, moves it a little bit long. He's going to come away with 6.5s.
Kyle rushed it just a little bit, didn't quite stand all the way through the board. So he drew his knees up and didn't have a nice connection like he should have had. That's why he left it a little bit short on the bottom. Up next we've got Harry from Arizona State doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. If he does this like he normally does, it's going to drop from above the railing. Yep.
And it does.
That was fantastic.
From this angle, it looked like it might have dropped from above the 3 meter. That was very nicely done. Little bit out. Very well done dive.
Christian, 107C, 3-0.
Christian, 107C, one of our most decorated veterans here, representing the USA, both nationally and internationally. Ooh, pretty good start. Christian actually popped his chest and looked a little bit too much with his chin on the out. So what it did was it stopped all of his rotation. He needed to come out knees first, and he needed to feel like he was getting uppercut in the gut. So he needed to check and lift the hips. He actually went the wrong way on come out. That's why he left it short. Corey from Texas doing front 3.5 somersault tuck. Excellent entry for Corey. Corey actually struggled with his hurdle for the longest time. Definitely looked like he fixed it there. Real strong showing from Corey. I'm actually really excited to keep watching him throughout this entire event.
I remember watching him in Moultrie, Georgia. He was doing his entire dive list basically standing on the end of the board as they were working on that hurdle and approach.
John Fox from Kentucky doing back 1.5 somersault pike. Again, just a reminder, John's DD is not as high as his competitors, but he is making up for it with those entries.
48.3. Michael, 51-34 D, 2-6.
Michael Mosca from Harvard doing a front 1.5 with 2 twists. A little rushed off the board. Could have seen a little bit more direction on the start. Not quite as square from our angle that we would have liked it to see. Could have squared it out the hips just a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the judges noticed that as well based on those scores. Jamie's doing a reverse 2.5 somersault from Purdue University. Jamie pushed his hips out a little bit on that takeoff. He did wait for the board to come up underneath him after he got him moving. He got the dive up and down just a little far out.
Riley, 305C, 3-0.
Riley McCormick from Arizona State doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. This should stand out above most of the competitors here. Very, very rushed, very, sitting far back on the hurdle, but he did a really good job with that on the out. Could have extended a little bit more through the hips. Those are pretty good marks considering his hurdle was that off balance. Brent Sterling from Tennessee doing a front 3.5 somersault tuck. That kid can spin.
He was spinning quickly, and if you, from our angle, you can see he keeps those knees in together, squeezes up to his shoulders, as opposed to splitting them way out in the cowboy, but he got moving.
Darian from Indiana doing a full out right now. Front 2.5 somersault with 1 twist.
Darian's not built like most of the divers that you see either. He's got nice broad shoulders, can still get down into the water, and he's extremely strong.
Pretty good job from Darian. Pretty good job. Could have maybe waited on the board just a smidgen longer, but there I've got not much to comment on that one.
No, he definitely put that one in the water nice. It's a little bit slightly short on his twist, but not enough to complain about here.
Sean McKinney from LSU doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck.
Sean got a little bit of a hurry off the diving board, and as he came out, let his back stay loose, left the dive short. He could have kept tight, probably would have brought that around vertical. Judges are going to count off for that.
Clark Thomas from Mizzou doing a back 2.5 somersault tuck. Now to stand out from all the other back 2.5s, he's going to have a really high takeoff, and he's going to have to spin real fast and drop it from probably right at the railing. Pretty good job. Little sloppy with the knees. Could have had a little bit tighter line, but that was pretty good.
He got up in the air, needs to keep the leg line tight.
51 even. Shane.
Doesn't take much for the judges to take off on these dives, and it doesn't take that much to get the high scores either.
Shane Miskell from Ohio State doing back 2.5 somersault tuck.
Awards.
Shane actually had a very long delay getting into his connection. Couldn't quite tell from our angle. It looked like he might have actually nicked the board.
Did look like his feet might have caught the corner there.
His time to closure, or how long it takes him to get into his tuck, has to be much less than that. He almost had a planche phase, and that takes off from the rotation that he's able to get. Greg Ferrucci from Kentucky doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Oh, excellent lines. He sold me on that come out. That's how a come out's supposed to look. You're supposed to go fingertips and toes into your target. You're supposed to anchor it in and absolutely just bury it on the bottom. Did a great job with that.
I'm really impressed with what Greg's doing here at the natatorium today.
Dave Benucci from Mizzou doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. David's wearing a cap. I don't quite know what's going on with the backstory there. Potentially a perforated eardrum.
Yeah, he's perforated his eardrum, I think, last summer.
Awards.
Had a good job getting up into the air, getting out. Left that dive just a little bit short. Going to come away with 5s and 6s.
Lane 405C 31.
Lane should be able to stand this dive up over the board and come out pretty high over, get a nice clean entry. Does a very good job getting that up and down and into the water.
Lane puts it down, and now just a reminder, he was the state champion here at the natatorium, so he's no stranger to the pool.
That diving board right there has been nice to him.
Now this is Taylor from Stanford doing back 2.5 somersault tuck. A little wide on that takeoff, a little rushed also off the board. Not quite as high or fast as you'd like to see it. A little bit flat on the come out too. Now remember, back 2.5 is the hardest 2.5. So you got to kick high and tight on the out just to make sure that you get a nice line through the water.
Got Nick doing reverse 1.5, 2.5 twists.
I've actually competed against Nick since he was 14. Nick having a little bit of a rough day. Seems to have a little bit of trouble with that board work today. Hopefully it won't affect him too much. Pretty decent marks so far. If he keeps it up, he should be able to get in there. Ahmad from IU doing a full out. Ahmad is lighting it up today. He is having an awesome meet. A little forward, a little slow on that circle. So he didn't have his arms up top on takeoff, so it was a little bit out as a result. Jordan from Minnesota, reverse 2.5 somersault tuck.
This weather shouldn't bother Jordan at all. It's cold up in Minnesota.
Pretty good job with that. A little crowded on the end of the board. Hanging 10. Now in diving, it's not quite the same as surfing.
No, you don't want to hang 10 in diving.
Hanging 10 is your toes are off the end of the board, so it's actually not a good position, especially for gainers or gainer twisters.
You want to be able to push down and through the board with your big toes.
Rafael from Arizona doing full out. So far, I've been pretty impressed with Rafael. Haven't seen him before. A little rushed off the board. Not quite the same pop that he gets on all of his other dives. So one thing I was going to comment on was his height.
Yes.
Michael Ross from Minnesota doing back 2.5 somersault tuck.
Awards.
Came out of that very loose in his back, too. Got a pretty rush coming off the diving board, fell back. Going to have to do a better job than that to be able to move up into the score, but he's not going to fall too far back with what the judges give him here.
Now remember, in diving, it's not just the entry that counts. It's the full visual aesthetic appeal to the judges. So even though the entry is really, really good, he came out a little loose and a little crimped. So that's where the deduction was from. Tommy from Florida State, same dive. Wow, really slow arm swing through the bottom, a little stuck on the start, but he did a pretty good job with that.
He got it moving really quick, then had to do a knee save at the end to keep it from flying by. As we're going into start of the fourth round here, we have Corey Bowersock leading the way with Christian Ibsen right behind him, Darian Schmidt in third, and Harrison Jones in fourth.
Awards 49.5. Beginning our fourth round. Noah, 53-33D, 2-6.
Noah from Stanford doing a reverse 1.5 twister. Again, starting off the fourth round.
There are just almost 14 points separating 16th from that valuable 8th place position, so this is still anybody's ball game.
305C, 3-0.
Logan from Virginia Tech, reverse 2.5 somersault tuck.
Now, from my vantage point, that was quite an amazing reverse 2.5. He was off the side of the board, literally turned sideways, and still managed to keep that reverse 2.5 out in front of the diving board. He's got a high of 6 and a low of 4, so everybody saw it a little bit different, but just seeing the athleticism it takes to pull that dive off is quite incredible.
Jacob for Virginia doing a back 2.5 tuck now.
Awards.
Pretty good. Actually, we have the luxury of seeing the takeoffs from the front a little bit more than the judges do. I'm not really seeing any of the divers today really getting fingertips through the top narrow. They have like a wide reach, so they're not really getting the spin that they could get out of the board. Connor Murphy does 105B. Does a pretty decent job on it. A little to the side, a little short, and a little out.
50.7. Jordan, 203A, 25.
Jordan Long from Duke. I haven't seen this one in a while. Back one and a half straight.
I competed this in college on
This
3 meter.
this is what we call a retro dive. If he pulls it off, it'll go big, though.
Wait, you're making me sound old here, Chris.
Awards.
That one, we're just going to see what the judges think about it. It was a very interesting dive.
A little different technique than what I'm
Hollow
used to seeing.
straight position.
Yeah.
When we did it back in our day, it was more of a arched out position.
40 even.
Comes out with 40 points, low of 4.5, high of 5.5.
Will Chandler from Texas. Reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Wow. Considering his takeoff, he did a phenomenal job with that. Not really high, not much room to work with, but he went in like a lawn dart.
Yes, he
did.
did.
Right through.
Definitely got himself into the dive and figured out where he was.
We've got Connor from Stanford doing the same dive. Judges are looking for height and speed and how long they can drop from the air.
Awards.
Better job from Connor. Pretty decent, spinning pretty quick. Nice drop time. Yep, it goes for a little bit more.
Josiah, 405C, 31.
Josiah from Utah doing inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Now this was my favorite dive on 1 meter when I was diving. It's all in the start. Everything after that's just cake.
I like front fall ends myself. I want bonus points too, just like they had in the diving shows.
Pretty decent start. Okay, now in diving you only get one come out, so you got to sell it to the judges. It looked like he creeped out just a little bit, almost like he wasn't too sure or confident where it was. Pretty decent marks. He had plenty of height and speed to be able to drop that in for sevens, though.
I tell my divers, when you're coming out, just come out, because you got one shot at it, and if you land flat on your stomach, you'll score more points if you're tight than if you're not.
It's true. Devin Burnett from SMU, back 2.5 somersault tuck.
And when you're on, you're going to rip, so go for broke.
Well, we are at the big show, so go big or go home, right?
Go big or go home.
I'm seeing this a lot from the divers today. They're dropping their heels and their butts getting back from their center of balance, so they're falling off the board. They're not staying on point, so the board's actually throwing them off instead of bringing them up. And they're also coming out with their upper body first. Ryan does reverse 2.5. Does a pretty good job with it. Little bit of a correction in his midsection, but does a nice job putting it down.
He got his fingertips up over his head to start, and then immediately dropped his arms out wide. Again, something you just don't see unless you're watching it from this angle.
John Santiago, the fourth from Auburn, doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Correction, I believe it's Santiago.
Got his toes hanging off the end of the board as well, and did a really good job riding the board and getting a foot push. I don't know how you pushed with your feet that far over the end.
Hanging tenon on the side, yes. Had some flat feet on the tuck. Now you'll see that a lot from the Chinese divers, but over here we like to do things right?
We do.
So we're going to have to see a little bit more toe point from the divers throughout the rest of the day.
They have to learn from David.
There you go.
That was an amazing back 1.5 pike. It's not as big a thrill of the dive as the back 2.5, but he just made that look very nice. Got a couple of 8s out of the judging panel there.
Harry Gainer 2.5 twister. Let's see what he does here. This kid can compete with the best. Pretty good job. Not quite as square as we'd like to see it, and the judges actually have a better vantage point than we do. A little fun fact about Harry, when he was in high school, did the hardest dive in the world at the time, inward 4.5 somersault from 10 meter. It's a degree of difficulty of 4.1 right now.
Harry was chasing David and Thomas for many years, and if he wasn't going to catch him, he was going to outdive him with new, harder dives. He can spin.
This is Christian from Stanford, back 2.5 somersault tuck. Now Christian should be able to do this dive exactly how he wanted it done today. Should be textbook. Let's see what happens. Dropped his elbows to the side a little bit. Didn't quite get a throw-up connection that we like to see, but left it a little bit short.
55.5. Corey, 305C, 3-0.
Corey Bowersock's our leader from Texas. Reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Now Corey has been putting together a very consistent list so far. Doing a very good job. A little bit short, a little bit out. Not quite what he was looking for.
He did get that spinning really well, though, but you got to be able to control the entry as well. While it's not the most important part, it's the last thing the judges see, so you don't want to leave yourself laying on your back.
John Fox, Kentucky, reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Now, this is one of John's hardest dives. Not the takeoff he wanted to see, but pretty good job.
Now, as a coach or a diver or a spectator, you don't want to watch them leaving the diving board from a foot back. It looks like we have a potential error on the scoreboard here, so we're going to have to wait for that to get corrected. There, they changed their 0 to a 6 and 58.5 points total.
I don't know what he was watching. Obviously, it was not what we were.
That's right.
Michael Mosca right now is doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Oh, pretty good job. He should have kicked out. He should have actually anchored into his target, and that means stopping the dive. He actually pulled shoulders and got loose a little bit, so that's why it was over and long on the bottom.
Yeah, Michael's struggling a little bit today.
Jamie Bissett, the Ontario native, doing inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Did an awesome job with the pike out on the bottom. Could have seen a little bit.
The first one that I think we've seen actually pike out of inward 2.5 tuck.
Could have seen a little bit more on top. I liked it though.
Yes, I did too. Judges didn't like as much as we did, but we liked it.
Riley McCormick, Arizona State, inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Same dive. Now Riley's a 2-time Olympian, so we'll see if he can do it a little bit better. Definitely spinning, but he pushed his hips out very first thing. That's the last thing you want to do, especially on that dive. Put it in pretty clean, but it could have been vertical and much closer and higher.
Yeah, he came out a little timid with the legs is the way he's coming out of that dive.
Brent from Tennessee, 205. Brent could have actually had a little bit more rounded shape like a turtle shell on that tuck. It's actually working against him. The flatter your back, the slower you spin, and the more, I guess, rolling the die, I guess would call it, on your come out.
It's much harder to get out of the dive when your back's completely flat. It's a hit or miss there. Darian will be doing the same dive, 205C, back 2.5 somersaults tuck. He should also be able to get up over the railing here if he can ride the board like he's been doing today. He comes in the third place position.
Darian did a pretty good job with that. Could have seen fingertips through a little bit more. He just reached over a tad on that one, went a little by, but that's going to go big. Yep, you just saw it. 7.5 eighths. That's a solid dive from Darian. Sean McKinney from LSU, inward 2.5 somersault tuck. A little quick off the board, a little cockeye. Let's see if the judges pick up on that. Remember, we have a better vantage point than they do. They're completely from the side. We're at the diagonal, so we can see from the front and the side. Pretty decent marks.
It looks like some of them saw that jump off to the side, and a couple of them probably didn't. He did a good job with the dive other than the push off to the side part.
Clark Thomas from Missouri. Reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the diving world, what he's wearing on his wrist are called wrist guards, usually seen on platform divers with a lot of wrist problems. Ooh, tried to He-Chong it. He came out a little bit too soon on the bottom.
He just looked like he might have missed his spot because he came out with like he knew where he was and then realized he wasn't and tried to make a correction. He need to add a little more somersault before he does that.
Now, just to explain myself, He-Chong, Chinese diver, known for his height and spin speed, came out always on half a flip early and could pull it on.
Come out half a flip early, perfectly straight body, look back and just wait for the entries.
That's right. Shane from Ohio State just did a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. He's slightly over the end of the board, leaning a little early with his hip push. Greg Ferrucci, reverse 2.5 twister. Now, Greg's one of the most graceful divers we have here today. He should be able to put this in for 8.5s.
Just should be able to. From our angle, he might have. We'll see what the judges
just
say.
a little crooked on takeoff.
He still does.
And there it is, just shy of what I predicted, but again, just showing us the consistency of how these divers are today. David Banucci from Missouri, back 2.5 somersault tuck. A little bit loose on that. Come out. Could have seen a little bit tighter kick. Sequence was not quite in order. We need to see knees first, then hips extending into the target. Pretty good job with his arms on takeoff, though. That's how you're supposed to stand through the line.
That really is going to be the difference here between the top 16 and the rest, is how they're coming out of their dives, how tight they're staying when they go into the water. And you see laying there, pretty good job getting up in the air, and then as he comes out, whole body gets loose, kind of floats it into the water a little bit low.
31.5.
Taylor from Stanford is doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. You can most certainly tell the California boys and the Arizona boys from the Midwest boys.
I'm trying to say some of us look like ghosts?
Yeah. Computer paper is more like it. Did a pretty good job with it. Now, if you'll notice, he didn't quite get full extension off into his entry. It's because he didn't quite get full extension off of the board with his reach. Now, remember, the finish mirrors the start, so how they do on the board pretty much determines how they're going to go in on the entry. Nick McCrory from Duke, back 2.5 somersault tuck. Now, Nick's not having really an on day right now. We'll see what he can do with the second half of his list. Showing us what Olympians do.
That's exactly right. I was getting ready to say he's starting to move up. His reverse 2.5 got him a pretty good jump. Remember, he started with a balk and a knee buckle on a front 3.5 on his first dive. 72 points is solid.
Ahmad, back 2.5 somersault tuck from Indiana. Ahmad's putting together a pretty good performance today. Let's see if the consistency stays up. Just a little heavy, but he'll take it. A little bit over and a little bit out. It's not quite a hit, but it's definitely not a miss.
No, definitely not a miss. His average on that dive is just over 54 points.
Jordan Lesser from Minnesota, front 3.5 somersault tuck. Now, just a reminder to you folks at home that are watching this and aren't real familiar with the diving world, this is 1 meter. So they're only 39.37 inches off the water. Jordan will be doing 3.5 rotations. Pretty good job.
That was a very
Pretty
good
good
job.
job, Jordan. He was a little chesty on the out, and that what that means is his chest, instead of staying hollow and looking with his eyes, he popped it just a little bit, so it slowed it down a little too much. A little heavy on the entry. Water caught the front side of his chest.
Sometimes you hear us get excited about dives. It's not always because the dive was absolutely amazing. It's just we see what they're doing to make a dive happen.
Rafael, pretty rush takeoff. Great job with it in the air, though. A little bit high on the kick, so it went a little bit by.
Incorrect dive.
Yeah, I actually just looked at that. He was supposed to do a back 2.5 somersault tuck. He actually just did the wrong dive. That is definitely going to affect his chances to a slim to none of making it into finals tonight. If he pulls something off today, he might be able to make it into consoles.
Yeah, you don't often see them do the wrong dive, as in wrong direction. And Michael just did reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck, a little flat-footed, a little bit slow getting it to develop, a little bit hollow or heavy on the entry.
Tom from Florida State, reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Pretty clean entry. Looked almost a little off balance on the start, but he regained composure and took control right back. Starting the 5th round.
And Noah comes into this round a couple positions out of the consolation finals in 18th.
It's his first rodeo, though, and he's doing pretty well. If he puts together some nice dives here in the last 2, he might be able to make it into consoles. Ooh, little rush, little crimped knees. Now remember, the judges are looking for something that's aesthetically pleasing to them or separates the diver from the competition. So he went nice long lines, and his twist was a little bit loose. Logan Schinholzer, back 2.5 somersault tuck.
Doesn't quite get fully extended on the takeoff, leaves his elbows a little bit unextended on the entry. He's going to give him a heavy entry, bigger splash.
JB from Virginia, reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Led a little bit with his shoulders on that one. You could have seen a little bit more extension through fingertip lead, so it wasn't quite as high as it could have been. He also came a little long on come out, which means that his arms were extended and away from his body, so it wasn't quite as clean as it could have been on the bottom either.
We have Connor doing back 1.5 somersaults pike from Indiana University.
Connor Murphy doing a pretty good job there.
He is. He's put in he's not got a hard list, but he's putting it in really well. Got a couple 8s on that, just floated through the takeoff. Beautiful pike position. We have Jordan doing reverse 2.5 somersaults tuck. See that dive very slow to develop. Waited on the board, got his arms through really, really slow, left him very short, and come away with 2.5s. Now Will Chandler is going to perform a front 1.5, or I'm sorry, back 1.5 somersaults with 2.5 twists. We've seen this dive done in the reverse direction. Now he's going to do it backwards. Doesn't get quite as much out of the board. Leads with his head. Leaves the dive quite short.
Twisted a little bit off the board. Could see a little bit later start on that twist.
Watch your feet come up and then start the twist out.
Right now we have Connor from Stanford doing inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Now the key to this dive is being in balance and being patient on the board. I wouldn't call it lazy, but I'd definitely be calling it patient. You got to wait for that board. Pretty good job with it. A little bit slow on his connect. He actually waited a little too long to get into it. A little more direction on top. He threw a little straight through instead of up and over on his start. Josiah from Utah, reverse 1.5 twister.
He just makes that dive look simple and easy. It's a 2.6 degree difficulty, so it's not exactly an easy dive. He waits for the diving board, lets the twist develop, nice tight body lines, great entry. Comes away with a couple 8s.
Devin from SMU doing an inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Now, just a reminder to you guys at home, it plays to your advantage and also against you with the harder dives that you do. The judges are simply scoring on how the dive is done, but it's up to the diver to make sure they're getting the most points possible out of what they can do. So if you see an easy dive done for 8s, it always outscores something that's harder for 5.5, 6s. So it's the risk the diver takes. So Devin here with a 3.1. One of the harder dives we're going to see today. Does a pretty good job with it. Ryan Hawkins from Virginia Tech, back 2.5 twister. Pretty tight twist. Legs were a little crossed.
Legs came apart a little bit as he left the diving board and
legs
got twisting.
Legs were a little crossed.
49.3.
Yeah, it's a question on what dive should you do is always one that comes up from parents, coaches, kids. The parents want to see harder dives often when you're trying to get them to big meets. Coaches want to see mastery of skill. My kids, I try to let them know if you can outscore the old dive consistently, then we can put it in your list. Until that time, we're going to work both of them.
John Santu from Auburn does a back 2.5 somersault tuck. Little split, little flat foot, but that's all right. Judges aren't going to see too much of it. You got a pretty solid dive right there between 6s and 7s.
We have Kyle with back 2.5 tuck. Kyle from Virginia Tech. Kyle got up in the air pretty well, kept it close into the board, spun well as he came out. He just didn't finish reaching back behind his head, so he kind of goes in the water heavy.
Kyle didn't quite get a good C position. It's more of like a crooked eye to the guys viewing right now. So he didn't quite get a stretch before he snapped in. So it was a little slow on the connection.
Got Harry doing that exact same dive, 205C from Arizona State.
Harry backed it off just a tad, but there's not much to complain about there as a coach. Excellent execution.
Definitely put the amnesia on the end of the dive. Just absolutely ripped that entry.
305B, 3-2.
Christian Ibsen from Stanford, reverse 2.5 somersault pike. You're going to see everybody else doing this tuck. So this is a little bit more degree of difficulty. This dive especially, you got to wait on the board. Out just a little bit early and a little bit loose.
He waited on the board. He didn't wait on the somersault there at the end. He can definitely do that better. Still coming away with 57 points, so that's going to keep him right there where he needs to be. The competition here in the prelims is to get into the top 8 or to get into the 9 through 16 spot. The scores will go back to 0, and they'll do them all over again in consoles and finals.
This is Corey Bowerstocks right now. He's doing a reverse 2.5 twister.
Corey jumps through the roof as well. He lost his ankles a little bit on that twist, got to dive up and down clean.
55.5. John.
He's having a pretty good meet so far today.
John Fox from Kentucky doing a reverse 1.5 twister, so one twist less than what you just saw. Again, John Fox, not the highest UD in the competition, but he's definitely pretty consistent. So he's going to have to nail this dive if he wants to stay where he's at.
It was a good dive. it went long, and he can't go long with the degree of difficulty that he's got. He's got to put those vertical.
50.7. Michael, 205C, 3-0.
Michael Mosca from Harvard, 205C, back 2.5 somersault tuck.
Awards.
Didn't quite get extension off the board. Didn't quite finish his push either, so his connection was a little bit slow, and it wasn't quite as high as he would have liked it to have been. Out way early, but he should have been able to salvage that a little bit more. Jamie Bissett, reverse 1.5 twister. Hipped it out just a little bit. Okay, now on reverse twisters, the judges are looking for the diver to stand the dive up the line instead of take it out. So they want to see it very high and a little bit closer to the board. They want to see it drop vertical about 2.5 feet out from the board.
Awards.
Riley McCormick, reverse 2.5 twister, a little rushed, not quite as long and as tight and crisp as we like to see it.
58.5.
He looks like he just wasn't quite comfortable with the way the dive was setting up, and he felt like he had to really muscle that dive around. Where Christian, you watched him just float up into the air, and the whole dive happens for him.
Definitely uncharacteristic of him. Brent from Tennessee doing reverse 2.5 somersault tuck right now. Pretty good extension. Spun it. Oh, just a little bit of a bobble on the out.
I'm not sure if I'm out there. That was going really well.
So remember, the divers have to sell it the first time.
Even. Darian, 305C, 3-0.
Darian doing the same exact dive. Little bit late on the out, a little bit rushed on the start. He could have been a little bit more patient. Pulled it with his shoulders, went by. Now, if you'll notice, Darian, he's one of the bigger guys, so his board tends to dip the water. We call it dipping the board.
Now, Darian came into the round in first place. That dive dropped him a couple spots, but it still keeps him in position to make a run at the finals here.
Sean from LSU doing a front 3.5 somersault tuck. Little forward on the board and a little bit cockeyed. Not the takeoff you want on that dive. Could have saved it though. He rushed it off the board. If you're forward, especially on a gainer or a front with multiple somersaults and rotations, you're going to have to be as patient as you can to make sure that the board's giving you everything it's got. Clark from Missouri doing a front 2.5 somersault pike.
Awards.
As far as dives are concerned today, that's a relatively simple dive, but he did a really good job getting it up and down into the water.
Shane, 405C.
Even from up where we are with headsets on, you could hear the hands touch the water and rip through.
Shane from Ohio State doing an inward 2.5 somersault pike. Now this is a huge degree of difficulty. This might actually be the hardest I've done today. Oh, I'm sorry, I had an error on my announcer sheet. He did it tuck. Pretty good job with it. Kind of slow on his connection. Didn't really work the tuck. It was pretty open.
Greg, 51-52B, 3-2.
Greg Ferrucci, full out from Kentucky. He's doing a pretty good job today. He's going to be one of your contenders later on tonight for that title if he can keep it up.
It didn't look like he quite got his hands together there on the entry. The rest of the dive was very fluid. Weight on the diving board, sit back just slightly more. He's going to be able to line that up and just go in completely straight up and down. Could
have seen just a little bit more heel drive on his twist. This is David Benuki from Missouri doing 405C, inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Pretty good job from David. Doing a nice job there. Hipped it out just a tad. Could have seen it a little bit closer and higher. Right now we've got Lane from Purdue doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Pretty good job on connection. Very nice form in the tuck. Could have been a little bit more round in that tuck. Just kicked it a little tight. Not by that much, but it was pretty good marks from the judges.
52-35D, 2-9.
We have Taylor from Stanford doing 52-35D. That's a back 2.5 twister. Actually does a pretty good job with it. A little bit leaning to the right on takeoff, so it wasn't as square or as in the middle of the board as it could have been.
Started off with his head up and back looking for the ceiling. Makes it a lot harder to change that shape, but he did a good job with the dive overall.
Nick McCrory, exact same dive. Nick's starting to pick it up a little bit here. He's going to be exciting to watch.
Nick has fought his way back into 12th position at this point in the round. And that's not going to hurt him too bad at all. It's a very well done dive. Maybe back a little bit. From this angle, it looked like he could have been a little bit short. Judges don't seem to have agreed with us.
Ahmad from Indiana doing a reverse 2.5 somersault tuck. Oh, phenomenal job waiting on that board, Ahmad.
Last thing that I see are the feet going into the water, and he left his flat, but the rest of that dive was just amazing.
He's got to lose the canoes. Jordan from Minnesota doing a reverse 1.5 twister. One of the simpler dives, but Jordan does a pretty good job with it. So let's see if he can make up for his lack of difficulty with how well he does it.
Does a pretty decent job with that dive. He's got his feet crossed as he's doing his twist. I'm not sure the judges are going to see that from their side, but it does allow it to go just a little bit long.
Rafael failed his last dive, did this one instead of what he was supposed to do. Let's see if he can do it as good or better. It's actually a very good dive. Almost an identical replica. Yeah. Just kicked a little bit high, a little bit over. Pretty good job with it.
Mikey, 52-35D, 2-9.
Mike from Minnesota, he's doing a back 2.5 twister.
Awards.
Almost looked like he wasn't going to be square on that, but did a good job getting the hips back to where they needed to be. So he went in pretty square.
56.
Judges seem to like it. That's about the best scores we've seen today on that dive, with the exception of Nick and maybe one other. Tommy finishing off the 5th round, front double twister. Could have been much, much faster in the twist. Did an okay job with it.
50.7. Beginning our
Got a mixed bag there between 5.5 and 7s.
405C, 3-1.
Noah starting the very last round, the 6th round, doing inward 2.5 somersault tuck.
There are only about 12 points, or 11.5 points, separating 16th position to that final spot into the finals in the top 8. That's a very tight competition for this last spot.
Awards. .8. Logan, 405C, 3-1.
Logan doing the same dive here. He's from Virginia Tech. Now Logan is known for how fast he spins. He's had a little bit of a rough day today, but let's see if he can finish strong. Fantastic job on that.
Swam just slightly early on that dive, and that's about all you can see from here.
Pike save just a little early. Now, for those of you that are watching that don't know what a pike save is, as the diver actually enters the water, they create an air pocket, and then they suck the entry down in by doing a front roll underneath. So the direction of rotation, they continue the roll through the water in the same direction to ensure that the splash is as small as it could be. Fantastic job right there from JB. Strong finish for him.
57 even. Connor, 51-34 D26.
Connor Murphy, front 1.5, 2 twists to finish off the day.
Connor didn't appear to get that somersault moving very well. Got a little bit delayed, a little stalled out, left the dive quite short.
A little cautious on the start, and that's why it wasn't quite as fast or as high as all the other competitors. Jordan from Duke, inward 2.5 somersault tuck. It looks like some of these guys today are second guessing their come outs. I don't know if it's the sprayers being different than their home pool, but almost second guessing where they're at in the air. So it almost looked like a double come out there.
Will be performing 107C front 3.5 somersaults tuck from Texas. He got that dive moving, got in the water straight up and down and clean, a little bit back on the end of the board. Good job using his feet to get it up there and get it going.
For a stomp on the board, that was a pretty good job.
That was a great job for stomping that board.
Connor from Stanford, front 1.5, 2 twists to finish off the day.
Connor is our 16th position going into this round. He needs a really good dive to stay there or even move up.
That actually might do it.
That should put him up a little bit higher than where he was. Should make him safe in that top 16.
54.6.
He will be on the bubble. That's close to call. He might be in there though. Josiah from Utah, front 3.5 somersault tuck.
For the moment, that does move him into first place.
Josiah, sky high. Did a pretty good job with it. Just left it a little long.
And Josiah came in 8th place. He was on the bubble there for making the finals versus the consolation.
Just shy of 60 points there. That might be good enough to get him in there.
His average score on that dive was just under 45, so that was a really good job on his part.
Devin Burnett from SMU doing a back 2.5 twister. Wow, phenomenal job. Just reached a little wide, a little soon. Could have gotten a little more extension up through the top of that takeoff with his fingertips, but that's a solid dive. Ryan Hawkins from Virginia Tech doing a reverse 2.5 twister. Ryan did a great job with that. Maybe just slightly out, a little crooked on his takeoff, but
kind of
really
had his arms a little bit wide as he left the board. Not a lot to complain about there. He was in 14th position. That should solidify him there in the consolation finals.
John from Auburn finishing off with a inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Solid entry. Backed it off just a tad. Fingertips weren't quite at vertical on takeoff, so when they're a little bit in front, the butt comes back on the push.
left that tuck a little loose, too. He got a little wobble in the somersault, but he comes away with 7.5 sevens.
Kyle finishing off with the reverse 1.5 twister. Judges probably would have liked to see that a little bit closer and dropping from a little bit higher.
42.9. Harrison, 405C, 3-1.
This is actually one of my favorite dives that Harry does. And we're 2.5 somersault tuck. If he hits this like he can, he's going to go straight 8.5 nines.
Harry came into the round leading. Left it short.
Not quite, yeah. Overly cautious on the start. Backed off of balance, slightly behind his center of balance, and it left it short.
65.1.
I'll take sevens on a miss, though, any day.
I would, too. That's what we call a good miss.
Christian, hardest dive of the competition right here from
Christian
Stanford.
needs 71 points to overtake Harrison. His best on this dive is 87.5. That wasn't perfect, but it was fairly well executed. That might be enough to do it. It's a little bit long, so we'll see what the judges think about it. It's going to come out with 75.25, so that will put him above Harrison on the leaderboard.
Corey finishing off with a full out right now. He's from Texas. Wow, definitely not the hurdle you want on that dive. That is what we call muscling a dive. You did a pretty good job with it too. Yeah, you got a mixed bag. You got ranging all the way from 4 to 6.5. It's sometimes judges just don't know what to do with it. You want to reward him for actually completing a hard dive and doing it fairly well, but at the same time, you almost want to take off more for not doing it the way it should be.
It should be to begin with. That's where you let the degree of difficulty make the determining factor on the overall score.
John Fox finishing off from Kentucky here with an inward 2.5 somersault tuck.
That inward 2.5 got up in the air.
Yeah. John a little wide on his throw. Could have been a little more narrow. It's like through the middle of the board. We got it moving a little bit quicker, so you had a little more time to drop it on the end. Michael Mosca, inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Big hands on that entry, no complaint about that. Backed it off a little and rushed off the board. He didn't quite finish his push and get the extension he needed to be able to connect fast.
He just hasn't looked like he's been comfortable down there today.
Jamie Bissett from Purdue finishing off with the front double twister. It almost looked like he squared a little early and had to work it in on the bottom.
Work the bottom, get his hips up. The dive being a 2.6 degree difficulty and not back or reverse makes it look easy. So you just have to impress the judges that much more.
Riley McCormick from Arizona State having a kind of a rough day today. He's more of a platform diver. That's a good dive.
That wasn't a bad dive at all.
That's a good dive.
Maybe you should have said that earlier.
Probably should take my foot out of my mouth right now.
63 even. Brent, 405C, 3-1.
Brent Sterling from Tennessee finishing off with an inward 2.5 somersault tuck. Brent had his chest in just slightly on the board. There's one of two things that can happen. You can either do what he did and push your butt back just to make sure you clear it and leave it a little short and out, or you can keep it real tight and long. So I'm glad he did the prior versus
short
the latter.
Short and out is much better than tight and long.
Judges definitely appreciate that. Darian finishing up with an inward 2.5 somersault tuck.
Darian comes into the round in 4th place. He should. Good quality dive will keep him into the finals.
Now remember, folks, just to get into finals, a lot of the time it's just consistency and doing dives pretty well. They don't have to be awesome dives. Just a pretty good dive will get you into finals or consoles.
He did that pretty well.
Darian a little bit back on the boards, piked out maybe slightly too soon for that takeoff, but he did a pretty good job with it. 63 points will definitely keep him where he needs to be. Sean from LSU finishing off on the back 2.5 twister. I've seen a lot more of these dives today than I usually do at NCAA's. Usually they stick to the reverse 2.5 twister. Dive had a little trouble from the start. Little lean into the left, definitely pulled his left shoulder. So his takeoff wasn't through the middle, and he was cockeyed off the start. Definitely to the side, wasn't square, and you see it in the marks there from the judges.
Yeah, he definitely needed to work the bottom of that dive after he got off the diving board if he wanted to salvage it. And he just didn't get his hips up and his legs over his head.
Clark finishing off with a full out. He's from Missouri. Pretty good dive, left it a little short. Almost looked like he was out of sync on the hurdle.
Yeah, he didn't take that dive up as high as some of the other men in the competition have done. It makes it a lot harder to finish the dive if you're not up over the board when you square out and come around.
Shane from Ohio State finishing off with the same dive.
Shane's right there on the bubble for that last position. This dive's not going to help him.
A little too far forward on that last step. Carried into the hurdle. That's definitely not where you want to be on the full out.
$17.6. Greg, 405C, 3-1.
Greg Ferrucci from Kentucky finished off with an inward 2.5 somersault tuck at the very first dual meet with Indiana and Kentucky this year. I literally watched him do a perfect inward 2.5 on 1 meter. Went for straight 8.5 nines. Not quite as good, but that was fantastic. That was fantastic. That's probably the best one we're going to see today.
That's another one of those that he kind of came out a little bit before he probably should have and left it a little bit with something makes you say, That's still going to keep him up into the third position and should be fairly safe here for finals.
David Benucci from Mizzou finishing off with a gainer 2.5 twister.
David comes into the round in 6th position. He did a really, really good job staying on the board with his left foot almost off the left corner of the diving board. Still waited, showed lots of patience, puts it up and down.
It's a true mark of a veteran right there, not freaking out from a takeoff like that. Lane Rogers from Purdue finishing off with the same dive. Pretty good job with that one, Lane.
Lane came in 10th position. Needs a big dive to be able to move up from there.
64.5.
His way was 64 points. It's going to put him right on the bubble in 8th position for the moment.
Taylor from Stanford, reverse 2.5 twister. Rick Schiavone doing a pretty good job with the Stanford boys. Pushed it out just a tad, a little bit short. That was a pretty decent dive. Nick McCrory finishing off with an inward 2.5 somersault tuck. He's from Duke. And Nick's really been picking it up the last half of this list, and especially since after the first few bobbles that he had in the beginning. We're looking for a pretty decent dive right now. He's put himself in a position where he doesn't have to absolutely nail this dive, but I have no doubt in my mind it's going to be a good one. There it is.
If all you did was watch this first dive, you'd never believe that he was going to put the rest of them together like that. Comes out with 79.05 points, one of his best that he's done in his career. Definitely enough to move him up to where he wants to be.
Ahmad Abdul Latif from Indiana, Egyptian diver, he can spin inwards like nobody's business. Didn't quite push all the way through the board.
Yeah, you see him pike out, almost kicking the U.S. Olympic team's logo on the wall there, right? Beautiful direction, waits for the dive to come around after he pikes out.
405C, 3-1.
Jordan from Minnesota also finishing off in the 2.5 somersault tuck.
Notice we got a lot of divers here from the Big Ten.
I'll just leave it at that.
Well, with the women's competition, there weren't as many. There was another conference that had a lot of the women in it.
Very nice entry from Jordan. Very nice entry. A little cockeyed on the bottom. Wasn't quite square. Let's see if the judges pick up on that.
63.55.
Pretty good dive.
Rafael, 405C, 3-1.
Rafael from Arizona finishing off with a 2.5 somersault tuck.
Again, beautiful jump. Got the dive up and moving. Just came out of it just a little bit before he needed to. Doesn't make that final run to the water. Leaves it a little bit short.
Not quite a lunch bag letdown, but definitely not what he was hoping for.
Yep. Michael just completes a really nice reversed 1.5 and 2.5 twist. Got a little bit forward on the board as he left. Had to work the board to get up over the top. Still comes away with 6.5.
Tom, 405C.
Tommy Newbacher finishing the entire prelim event, finishing with an inward 2.5 somersault tuck.
Thomas in 15th position. That dive might be enough to move him into the top
That'll
8.
definitely keep him in consoles, and that might actually bump him up, as Kevin said.
We're waiting here for the scores.
74. This concludes the prelim. The consolation.
That puts him right on the 8th position. That was an incredible
Wow.
dive.
Talk about being clutch.
3:36 p.m.
All right, as we get ready to take a break here for a minute, diving will be back in approximately 20 minutes. They're going to do some warm-ups. The consolation finals will be the places 9 through 16. That will come up in approximately 20 minutes. So we'll look forward to seeing you back here shortly. In the meantime, we're going to take a break, and we'll get back to it in a little while.